Lauren?
Andrew's here.
Okay, I think, see, hold on one second.
Did you get a link to the meeting memo, Mimi, or did you want me to grab that?
No, I have it.
Okay.
For those of you who have joined the public hearing, if you would like to speak today and you have not yet pre-registered to speak today, can you please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to be added to the speaker list? All attendees are muted until it is their turn to give testimony.
Okay.
For those of you who have just joined us, if you haven't pre-registered to speak today, but would like to be added to the speaker list, can you please use the raise hand function so that we can add you to the list, and we'll call your name and unmute you when it's your turn to speak. Steve, we're going to need a couple of minutes. Lauren needs to re-log in.
At 10 o'clock, I'll just let people know we're going to go a little bit longer before we start. Is that okay?
Sure.
So you just give me the heads up when it's time, okay?
Okay. So it's 10 o'clock, and I'll say this one more time for those of you who've just joined. If you haven't pre-registered to speak today, can you please use the raise hand function so that we can add you to the speaker list, and we'll call upon you and unmute you when it's your turn to speak.
All right, Mimi, you're gonna let me know when it's good to go, right?
Yes. 1 second, let me just add, hold on. I'm just adding the co-prac members to the panelists list. 1 second.
Okay.
Andrew?
Folks, for just a minute. We're just working out a final technical details.
Andrew, are you there?
Yes.
Lauren is having difficulties becoming a speaker. So if you could maybe, do you have the public hearing registration list up?
I do not. Let me go grab it.
Okay. If you could call the speakers while I add them, that'd be helpful. And as of right now, let's see.
Can you email me the link to the registration form, Mimi?
Yeah. Okay, sent.
Okay.
Hold on. I don't see Lauren on the list.
All right, Mimi, we good to go now?
Yes, we can. Once Andrew's ready, we can begin.
Okay, I'm ready.
Good. Okay. Good morning. It's a little after 10. 10:03 on via Zoom to receive testimony concerning a request submitted rule of professional conduct, prosecutor, or a candidate for that office from public employee unions. My name is Steve, but professional responsibility and conduct from the committee on the NOLA, David Carr, when he came on later. We're also joined by the very capable Lauren McCurdy, who will be keeping.
Steve, the attendees are having trouble hearing you. You're cutting in and out. Your connection's not very good.
The letter proposing a new rule was submitted to the State Bar in early June by 3 current elected district attorneys, those from Contra Costa, San Francisco, and San Joaquin, and 1 former district attorney from San Francisco who was also a candidate for office in Los Angeles. On July 2nd, the State Bar's interim executive director, Dena Roche, wrote back to evaluating the proposal.
Steve, your connection's really bad still.
It's really bad.
We can't hear you at all.
Well, shall I, you can't hear me at all. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm hoping that this will bring me back better. Is that better?
That is clear.
Yes, much better.
Okay.
Maybe you could start again. I don't think a lot of people heard what you said at the very beginning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for intervening. For those of you who heard this already, I apologize. For those of you who didn't hear it, perhaps it will be useful. I'll see if I can summarize and move a little more quickly. What we're here to do today, this is a hearing on the district attorney's proposal for a new rule of professional conduct, or for an ethics opinion that would prohibit an elected prosecutor or a candidate for that office from seeking or accepting political or financial support from law enforcement public employee unions. I'm the chair of my name is Steve Bundy. I'm the chair of the State Bar of California's Committee on Professional Responsibility and Conduct. In my earlier version of this, I identified all the other members who were present, but I'll skip that for now, just in the interest of efficiency. We also have some excellent State Bar staff, and most of the voices you hear will be those of State Bar staff. The way we got here, essentially, is that the DAs submitted this proposal in early June. The State Bar responded in early July, and the gist of the State Bar's response was that there were some questions that the State Bar wanted to look at, particularly legal questions about this rule, and that they were referring the matter to us. We're the in-house ethics group, if you will, at the State Bar, for us to evaluate the proposal and submit a recommendation or report back to the Board of Trustees. And that's our role. What we're doing what we've done already as part of that work is we heard some initial testimony from a variety of supporters and opponents of the measure at our July 24th meeting. And based on that meeting and on our own research, we prepared an initial list of questions about the proposal that was posted with the agenda for this meeting, and also circulated to a wide audience of potential commenters. Many of you will have already seen that. If you haven't already seen that, a link to those questions is in the chat function. You can go in and take a look yourself and see the questions that have been on our minds as we began to think about this problem. I want to stress something very important for everyone to understand, which is that at this point, the committee is in learning mode. We have not, well, ultimately we'll report some findings to the Board of Trustees. We're not near that point yet. We haven't taken any position on the proposal, and we come to the hearing with an open mind. We're keenly interested in hearing from everybody who has something to say about the proposal and who can inform us about its strengths, its weaknesses, and the sort of background as well. Let me just say a word about the process we're going to use today. We already have a substantial number of participants showing up. I'm seeing about 50 participants, outside participants. The hearing is being recorded, and so for people who are going to be participating and giving testimony, you should begin by speaking slowly, stating and spelling your name. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization, we'd appreciate it if you could also identify the organization. Because we have so many speakers, we're going to ask people to limit their testimony to about 3 minutes in order to anticipate all anticipated speakers, because we don't want to run on forever. The committee or its staff may have questions during or after remarks, and if that's the case, then we'll go on for longer than the 3 minutes, right? Because we want to make sure that we get a chance to explore issues that people raise that we think merit further discussion. If, as Mimi has been repeating, if there's someone here who has not already signed up using the online registration form, you should use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that you'd like to give testimony, and then the staff will add your name to the speakers list. And all speakers will be muted until after their name is called. We have called for written submissions, and if you made a written submission with your registration form, then we have those materials. The committee has had those distributed to them. If you have additional written materials that previously have not been submitted, you can email them to Mimi Lee, and her email address is mimi.lee@calbar, calbar.ca.gov. And I'll ask her also if she could to put her email address in the chat window. We'll consider written submitted materials, and if you haven't submitted any yet, feel free to do so promptly, and we will take account of them. A last word for those of you who are planning to testify. We're very interested in what you have to say. We're particularly interested in testimony that helps us to answer the questions that we have posed to commenters and that are in the chat function. We will benefit less from comments that simply repeat the points made by those who testified before you, right? So if what you have to say basically tracks what earlier speakers have said, right? You'll help us, and you'll also do a favor for your fellow commenters waiting behind you to testify if you simply identify the positions that you agree with or the speakers who presented them without repeating those positions in detail. Because if it's simply a matter of how many people support a particular point of view, we can keep track of that without necessarily hearing that point of view again. So that's the background. We're all very much looking forward to this. And Lauren, with that in mind, could you call the first speaker?
So I'm stepping in place for Lauren until she's able to reconnect to the meeting. And our first speaker this morning is San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin.
Good morning, and thank you all for your work and your attention to this important issue. In keeping with the instructions you provided, I will restate my name and affiliation. I am Chesa Boudin, C-H-E-S-A, last name B-O-U-D-I-N, and I am the District Attorney of the City and County of San Francisco. Dear esteemed members of the Committee on Professional Responsibility and Conduct, Chair Bundy, Committee Coordinator Tuft, and members Bacon, Bonola, Basnar, Carr, Fields, Enlander, Koss, Kruger, Lee, Roche, and Whitney. Thank you for holding this important hearing and for hearing from the public around this critical issue. You've already stated the background, and I won't restate it here, but let me just say as an opening, this proposal seeks to cure the conflict that exists when prosecutors accept support from law enforcement unions directly and then are asked to investigate and prosecute officers in those same unions. It also seeks to clear the appearance of that conflict, even when an actual conflict may not exist. Across California, including in San Francisco, there are numerous law enforcement unions representing police officers, sheriff's deputies, and correctional officers. These unions play a major role in local, state, and even national politics, frequently supporting or donating to candidate committees. Since 2000, for example, law enforcement unions have spent nearly $65 million in Los Angeles elections, over $19 million in New York City elections, and $3.5 million in Chicago elections. But a significant ethical problem emerges when those unions get involved in directly supporting elected prosecutors. Prosecutors, like judges, are responsible for public duties that transcend those of ordinary advocates. It is of paramount importance that the public trusts prosecutors to carry out those duties fairly and impartially. Prosecutors are different than many other elected officials, as they are frequently tasked with impartially determining whether police officers have committed a crime in use of force and other cases, and if so, whether and how to prosecute that crime. District attorneys undoubtedly will review use of force incidents involving law enforcement union members. When they do, the financial and political support of those unions should not influence or appear to influence the district attorney's decision-making. When prosecutors take money or support from law enforcement unions for their controlled committees and campaigns, it creates, at a minimum, the appearance of a conflict, and often a very real conflict of interest, when those prosecutors entrusted with prosecuting officers are members of the same unions. It becomes understandably hard for the public to trust that prosecutors are making the right calls and holding police accountable when those same prosecutors are relying on financial or political support from those officers' unions. Our proposal calls on the California Bar to hold prosecutors accountable to the high ethical standards it promotes and prevent prosecutors from taking money or support directly from law enforcement unions. As you know well, the state bar's rules of professional conduct generally prohibit a lawyer from representing a client when, quote, the lawyer has a legal, business, financial, professional, or personal relationship with or responsibility to a party or witness in the same matter, end quote. Indeed, the California Court of Appeal has specifically found that a conflict exists, quote, whenever the circumstances of a case show a reasonable possibility that the district attorney's office may not exercise its discretionary function in an even-handed manner, end quote. There can be no doubt that there is a reasonable possibility that a DA is not acting impartially in choosing or declining to prosecute an officer when the DA has relied financially on that officer's union. To cure this conflict and to maintain public confidence in the fairness and impartiality of prosecutors, ethical rules must explicitly preclude elected prosecutors, any prosecutors seeking election, and their campaign committees from seeking or from accepting political or financial support from law enforcement unions. Such a rule would not only help to avoid conflicts and ensure the independence of elected prosecutors, it also would enhance trust in our criminal justice system at a time when trust is sorely needed. Now, I want to specifically and briefly address some of the First Amendment concerns that have been previously raised in the conversations around this issue. Those First Amendment issues are a red herring. Our rule would survive First Amendment scrutiny because it is narrowly tailored to further the state's compelling interest in maintaining public confidence in the integrity of prosecutors. It also does not impinge on unions' ability to exercise speech around political issues because those unions could, of course, still continue to spend their money on influencing campaigns. The rule would simply prohibit candidates for the office of district attorney from accepting support directly into their candidate-controlled committees. In the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court case of Williams-Yulee versus the Florida Bar, the court upheld a Florida state ethical ban on personal campaign solicitations by judicial candidates. The court applied strict scrutiny and found that the law was narrowly tailored to address a compelling state interest in ensuring public trust in the judiciary. Here, likewise, recent events can only reinforce that compelling state interest in building public trust in the impartiality of prosecutors who, like judges, are entrusted to be fair and have integrity. And that trust is particularly relevant when it comes to investigations into and dealings with law enforcement unions. It is our view that both candidate and candidate committees should be restricted, but independent expenditures would not be restricted by committees. And therefore, the idea is that law enforcement unions could, of course, create their own committees and spend money as they see fit. This rule would simply restrict the ability of candidates and candidate-controlled or affiliated committees. Although such a restriction on committees does go further than the Florida rule in Williams-Julie did, the restriction is, as there, narrowly tailored. Indeed, it is precisely tailored to fit the compelling state interest that we are asserting and that millions of people across the country have taken to the streets over the last several months to demand. Now, in closing, I want to just share a few final thoughts. We are in a very unique and powerful moment in our nation's history following George Floyd's murder. Public trust in the government, as well as in law enforcement, has been badly and in many ways justifiably corroded. Protests have formed worldwide to demand police accountability and have called on our institutions and on our profession to demonstrate that Black lives matter. The public is demanding that police and prosecutors be accountable and that our laws are applied equally to those in power. In this moment, the bar should hold its prosecutors to the highest ethical standards the bar demands in other contexts. As a prosecutor dedicated to preserving the integrity of this profession, I call upon you to ensure that we cure the conflict of interest that exists when we allow prosecutors to accept support directly from law enforcement unions for political campaigns. It is only when prosecutors are not beholden to law enforcement unions that the public can truly be confident in the independence and neutrality of the decisions prosecutors make about officer-involved shootings or other criminal investigations. I hope this committee supports our proposal and works to build trust in the integrity of district attorneys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boudin. I know you have a busy schedule. Do you have a moment to ask, perhaps respond to a question or two?
Absolutely. I'll stay as long as you have questions for me. You've
already addressed a number of questions that we had. One that is on our mind is, suppose we agree with you that this rule is both warranted and effective and constitutional, right? I guess there is a question also about why the state bar and why not, for example, the state legislature. The state legislature is the place that typically regulates campaign activity by politicians generally, right? And the state legislature has also enacted a specific statute regulating conflict of interest for district attorneys. To name a couple of examples, is this more than just a professional question? I guess is the way to put it. And how would you argue that the legislature shouldn't be the person to decide?
Thank you for the question. Let me be clear. I am not suggesting that there is no role for the legislature or that the legislature could not or should not consider this. I think that's a separate question. The ethics rules of this body matter. We need professional standards, and there are instances where ethics rules can do more than the legislature can do. And there are instances where both should act simultaneously or in parallel. But whether or not the legislature can or should act on an issue like this does not and cannot preclude this body from seriously considering the very real ethical issues that our proposal seeks to address.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Do any of the other subcommittee members want to comment or ask a question? Okay, that's I think all we've got right now. If we have further questions, we may. You wouldn't object if we contacted your office?
Absolutely not, Chair Bundy. I welcome any further questions, any ability to help the committee think through these issues and to respond to questions or concerns and to be in conversation with the committee is most welcome. I will stick around today as long as I'm able to listen to other comments, but I welcome dialogue with the committee at any point in the future as you navigate this decision.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Bundy.
Okay, our next speaker is Brian Marvel.
Thank you, Chairman Bundy and members of the committee. My name is Brian Marvel. I am president of the Peace Officers Research Association of California. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak on this matter. My first name is B-R-I-A-N. Last name is M-A-R-V as in Victor, E-L. I spoke at the last meeting, and I'm not sure how many folks were on it at that time, but I definitely want to reiterate my comments that we feel that this proposed rule intentionally discriminates against peace officers, their collective bargaining agents, and unions that represent them, along with violating our First Amendment rights. Moreover, the proposal is a political ploy designed to increase the electoral prospects of its authors by silencing the political voice of their opponents who advocate for victims' rights and justice. The authors of this proposal will never get our endorsements, and their insincerity is demonstrated by the omission of any constraints on the organizations representing criminal defendants and prisoners who not only have a direct interest in the district attorney's exercise of their discretion, but also condition support on a predetermination of cases that will come before them. You distill down the actual duties of the district attorney, police-related cases make up less than 1% of all of their duties. 99% of their time is prosecuting and charging accused criminals. If the authors were truly sincere in addressing conflicts of interest and ethics, they would have proposed eliminating contributions from the groups representing the 99% of what they do, and at a minimum, proposed eliminating contributions and endorsements from all organizations, irrespective of their viewpoint or politics. In addition, Attorney General Becerra opined back in February 28, 2018, with an analysis of a perceived conflict of interest in district attorneys. Amazingly, it was on point to the question these authors wrote in their proposal. The short answer is no. There is no conflict of interest. The AG's letter is attached to our rebuttal letter, so I won't go into too many more details on that. As outlined by Interim Director Hershkowitz, AB 571 takes effect on January 1st, and there's also current legislation by Assembly Member McCarty, AB 1506, that will alleviate the perceived conflict by these authors. I will conclude with this. The establishment of a partisan political advantage has no place in the rules that govern the ethical duties of the legal profession. Your own mission statement claims to promote inclusion. There's nothing inclusive about this proposal. We would hope that you would not weigh in on this, and I agree with you that I think there's a better recourse than what they've chosen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marvel. I don't have any questions. Do any other members of the subcommittee? Okay, thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Isabel Lopez, and just a friendly reminder that we're requesting each speaker keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. I will be using a timer and providing a 15-second warning. Ms. Lopez, it's your turn.
It doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like. No, it doesn't look like it. You may want to move on to Adrian Galvin, but I don't see him as well.
Is Adrian Galvin present? If Adrian is not here, our next speaker on the list is Stephen Silver.
All right.
Mr.
Can you
Silver.
hear me?
Oh,
Can you
yes.
hear me now?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Silver. It's your turn to speak. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. My name is Stephen Silver. By the end of this year, I will have been a member of the State Bar for 55 years. The last 50 years I have spent primarily representing public employee unions, many of which are comprised of law enforcement officers, some comprised of deputy district attorneys, some comprised of firefighters. I happened to find out about this meeting by accidentally observing a post on Facebook by Mr. Marvel, who explained what was going on. And I simply replied that as somebody who's been a devout liberal for the past, for my entire life, or at least adult life, I found this proposal to be ridiculous and definitely prejudicial. I certainly would favor a ban on all public or individual contributions to not only a district attorney's election, but to all elections, and have all. I would be thrilled if all elections were financed by the government and there were no private contributions by any special interests. The last thing I'll say, to be brief, is that in my many years representing unions comprised of peace officers, I have never heard, and I've been involved in a lot of the decision making as a spectator about which candidate to endorse. And I have never heard a police union say, we want to endorse this candidate because he's less likely or she's less likely to prosecute police officers. The only determinations I've ever heard were who would be the best candidate to complete the job performed by police officers to make sure that the people they arrested were prosecuted and punished where appropriate. I've never heard them say, oh, gee, we want to support candidate X because he or she would be less likely to prosecute police officers. They've always wanted to try to get the best person, and that, if you look at it, might be contrary to any desire to have somebody who wouldn't prosecute police officers, because the best person would not only prosecute them, but would prosecute them vigorously and proficiently. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I would urge you to eliminate all contributions if you're going to do anything. Otherwise, I would urge you to reject this special legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silver.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Marshall McClain. Mr. McClain?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for the time. My name is Marshall McClain. It's M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L, McClain, M-C-C-L-A-I-N. I'm on the executive board of PORAC. I'm also the president of the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association. As the president of Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, we find it offensive that police unions are singled out to curb out this First Amendment right by suggesting we should be banned from contributing to any elected office holders, most notably prosecutors' positions at this time. I mean, what's going to happen next, I'm not sure. LAPOA's members and I do believe that as citizens and specialized policing in this nation's busiest airport and the world's third busiest, excuse me, we're here on the front lines of safety and security at LAX Van Nuys, as well as we represent park rangers, as well as municipal police officers in the city of Los Angeles. We have the rights and perhaps the obligation to be active citizenry in elections. Disallowing these contributions from police union is a clear attempt to silence our collective voices on who represents our communities in different levels of government. And again, is a violation of our First Amendment rights. In the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the Citizens United States case, unions can spend the money on materials in support of or in opposition to a candidate for office, much like any individual can. A move to ban our participations in the electoral process would only disenfranchise LAPOA's majority-minority police force in a time when our country is reckoning with policing and racial divisions in our politics. It is necessary that our voices be heard in considering all levels of government. such as those voices who criticize us. LaPolla does seek an active role in this outcome. We want to see that our community, our nation, and being able to be participants in the political process is an important way to be a part of the conversation where everyone's voice is considered. To pick and choose who can be part of this political process does not represent the values of our country created to uphold equal participation for all citizens. And in closing, I've been a police officer on 24 years. I've been a Black man my entire life. And for the district attorney of San Francisco to try to invoke that Black Lives Matter and bring in an incident that didn't even happen in this state is not only disingenuous, that it's shameful. So thank you for your time and appreciate the consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClain.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Jasit Singh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasit Singh. It's spelled Jasjit. Last name is Singh, Singh. And I'm the program officer at California Change Lawyers. In tune with what was asked earlier, you know, I don't have too much to say, but I'll keep this short in terms of which aspect of support we're talking about. So California Change Lawyers, formerly known as the California Bar Foundation, is a statewide foundation whose mission is to build a better justice system for all Californians. In the wake of the recent murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many others, it's clear that time for change is now. Our criminal justice system is broken. Our system of accountability for law enforcement is broken. However, there is one solution that's within our reach, and that is protecting the integrity of our prosecutorial function and commitment to fair and impartial justice system. Fair elections are the foundation of a strong democracy, providing individuals from all backgrounds the equal opportunity to choose whom they entrust to act in the best interest of themselves and their community. These elected officials include our prosecutors, who work closely with law enforcement officers and are also tasked with evaluating whether officers have committed crimes. Our current system allows police unions to fund and endorse candidates who share their particular vision of public safety, often differing from the community's vision. Community's vision of public safety. We agree with the coalition of current and former prosecutors who believe that receiving campaign contributions from an entity that finances opposing counsel creates, at minimum, the appearance of a conflict of interest for elected prosecutors. We support the call to have the current rules regarding conflict of interest modified to explicitly preclude elected prosecutors or prosecutors seeking election from seeking, accepting political and/or financial support from law enforcement unions. We believe this modification would be a step in the right direction, helping to create a more trustworthy, accountable, and equitable justice system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Okay, our next speaker is Vern Pearson. Is Vern with us?
He's here, he's just muted.
Once a microphone is provided to you, Vern, you can unmute yourself and we'll be able to hear you.
Hello, this is Vern Pearson.
Good morning, we can hear you.
All right, good morning. I had a little bit of difficulty with the log on and unfortunately only able to do it on my cell phone.
Sure.
I want to keep my comments very brief, and there's been, I think, a number of different comments that have been made that we would echo. And I should say, for the record, my last name is Pearson, P-I-E-R-S-O-N. I'm the current president of the California DA's Association. And while we respect and appreciate the comments of our colleague from San Francisco, as an association, we disagree. And one, I mean, I think most significantly is this recommendation or request is profoundly unconstitutional, as described in the letter that we submitted last week. And to singularly identify one group and indicate that group is prohibited from political activism of any kind is really it's pretty far. I mean, the stretch of constitutional interpretation is pretty extreme that way. And I don't want to get into specific points beyond that, and would submit it on the letter that we previously submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. Just one quick question. As I heard Mr. Boudin this morning, he was saying that the proposal would not limit the speech rights of unions. It would simply limit the rights of candidates and their committees to solicit contributions and support from unions. Does that change your analysis at all, or not?
I mean, candidly, that I think it's a novel argument, but it's essentially a distinction without a difference. And again, I mean, I have great respect for Mr. Boudin and his position on this, and I do think it's well intentioned from his perspective. But I do think from a constitutional analysis, this request is unconstitutional. I don't think it will ever go into effect. It will be challenged in court and invalidated. And so, no, I would say it does not change the analysis.
One other question, Mr. Pearson, which is, can you tell me what it, or the committee, what does it mean when your organization takes a position? How does your organization reach its decisions about what position to take on this kind of issue? In other words, can we view you, to what extent can we view your organization as speaking for all the other DAs in the state, or some fraction of them?
Well, we're speaking for the DAs as an organization. So the California DAs Association has been in existence since the mid 1980s. It's been it is an organization that represents both the elected district attorneys as well as the appointed and the civil service prosecutors. I believe 4,000 plus prosecutors throughout the state of California. Each of the members of the board are elected by their constituency. In other words, the elected district attorneys nominate and elect a certain number of board members. The deputy DAs and assistant DAs nominate and elect certain members of the board. And then the board takes positions such as the one in this instance to oppose this. And it was a unanimous vote of the board to oppose this position, this recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that unless other members of the subcommittee have questions, I think that concludes what we have.
I have one question, Mr. Pearson. This is Dena Roche. Could you speak to the issue of how individual conflicts are handled within DA's offices generally? Is every office different in terms of analyzing conflicts, or is there standards that the offices generally follow in terms of how to identify when conflicts of interest happen?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it might take more than the amount of time you want to allot to this. So there's various cases that have interpreted conflict of interest, and the Attorney General's office, when there's a suggestion in a pending case that or a motion that's filed with the court to suggest that the district attorney has a conflict and cannot handle that case, it's essentially called the recusal motion. And I'm not prepared, although I can submit to you, there's a number of different cases that have defined what would constitute a legal conflict in those instances. In that case, the Attorney General would come into a case should there be a finding by a court necessitating a recusal, and then the Attorney General's office would handle it. And I should note in this discussion, it's relevant to consider that under the California Constitution and the California Government Code, that the Attorney General supervises every district attorney in the state of California. And the Attorney General has the legal power to step into a case should the Attorney General receive information that would suggest that the district attorney is not handling an individual case appropriately. And that is what's characterized generally as an abuse of discretion finding. And as a former, I've been a deputy DA, a chief assistant DA, a deputy attorney general, and now the last several years, a district attorney. But during my time as a deputy attorney general, I personally prosecuted one case that was a determination by the state attorney general that the district attorney at that time, that being, it was the former district attorney of Kings County, had abused their discretion by failing to prosecute a case originating out of Corcoran State Prison. So those do happen. They don't happen with the near frequency that I think that maybe some would think, but it's important to note in all of these discussions that as I understand this proposed rule, it would only affect individual district attorneys. It would not affect the state attorney general, and the state attorney general has ultimate oversight and authority to supervise the district attorneys in the conduct of their business. So I hope that answers your question without getting too much into the weeds.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the subcommittee? Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. If you wanted to send ahead those citations, that would be useful to us. We would welcome that.
Yeah, this is Andrew Tuft. Mr. Pearson, if you have any, I think you referenced the abuse of discretion. If there's a statute that sets that forth, please send that to State Bar staff. There's an email from my colleague Mimi Lee in the chat function, as well as any other authorities with respect to these questions. Would be very helpful for both staff and the committee.
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pearson.
The next person on our list, and I need to apologize as we go forward. If I misspell your name, please forgive me. The next person on our list, although she might not be here, is Deidre Edgar. Deidre, are you with us? Okay, the next person is Daniel Moore. Daniel, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you. It is your turn.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Moore, D-A-N-I-E-L, excuse me, M-O-O-R-E. I am a Deputy Public Defender for the County of Santa Barbara and a member of my office's Racial Justice Committee. The Racial Justice Committee is committed to fighting against systemic inequality, structural racism, and the disproportionate harm imposed on communities of color by the criminal justice system. I'd like to echo a lot of what District Attorney Chesa Boudin stated. I think people of color are disproportionately represented as victims of police brutality and excessive force. And when a prosecutor evaluates whether an officer has committed police brutality or excessive force or any crime, law enforcement unions finance that member's legal representation. I think one of the points that Chesa Boudin really pointed to that I think is really important is enhancing the trust in our criminal justice system, especially at this time. It is increasingly important. And I think this rule change would start to steer at least the trust back in the right direction. So on behalf of the Racial Justice Committee, we strongly urge the State Bar to implement a new rule of professional responsibility to reduce the possibility of political influence from law enforcement unions over prosecutorial decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions from subcommittee members? Okay, I think we're good then.
Our next speaker is David Wolf.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, David. Please proceed.
Thanks. My name is David Wolf. I'm a current practicing attorney in California. I'm a civil attorney. I'm not really related to police unions or prosecutors or anything. I don't really encounter them on a daily basis at all. I called in today because I want to voice my support for the proposed regulation, urge this committee to move it along to the Board of Trustees. I don't understand how the bar can say it's committed to equal access to justice and elimination of bias when it allows those running for positions of public trust to take large amounts of money from the very organizations they're meant to police. Los Angeles, where I live, the current district attorney has taken $2 million this year from the police unions, and it's hard to see this as anything other than a direct reward for not bringing charges in nearly 700 officer-involved homicides over her tenure. And so I, again, urge this community to move this regulation along to the Board of Trustees. Just to address a point from an earlier commenter who stated that 99% of district attorney work is not police related. In my opinion, the point of ethics is not to legislate to the 99%. It's to protect the public from the 1%. You know, I never screw up with my trust account. I try very hard not to, but the rules are there for the people that use them like piggy banks. And if you don't legislate against the lowest common denominator, you're going to end up unleashing the wolves on the public. I also want to say the point of law enforcement unions isn't the protection of the public, it's the protection of the police. As to the First Amendment violations, I don't know a lot about this area, but I don't see anything that would prevent individual police officers from still exercising their First Amendment rights to support whatever candidate they choose. And I understand there's a lot of other people, so I'd like to yield my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf.
Our next speaker is, and again, forgive me if I misspell your last name, Aaron, but Aaron Penichkul. And I'm sure I did not do that right. But Aaron, if you're with us, it is your turn and we welcome you to speak.
I am here, thank you. My name is Erin Penichkul. That's E-R-I-N, last name P-A-N-I-C-H-K-U-L. So I am a 2015 law school graduate, soon to be a California Bar Association member, and I'm calling to support the ethics proposal. I believe that it'll cure conflicts of interest that come up when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money. Prosecutors have to be independent in deciding when and who to prosecute. And in order for them to do that, they can't be influenced by special interest groups like law enforcement unions. California prosecutors can't be indebted to these police unions that finance their campaigns and those that endorse their candidacy. That just means there's a conflict of interest. It's difficult to trust prosecutors to make decisions regarding officers fairly. Prosecutors will absolutely review use of force incidents involving officers and police unions. And police unions should definitely not be allowed to influence those decisions. We need this rule to explicitly and directly preclude prosecutor candidates from seeking or accepting support from police unions because it is the only way to avoid conflicts of interest between law enforcement and prosecutors. Allowing police unions to donate to prosecutors is really like having one baseball team's union donate to an umpire. It's simply hard to be unbiased when judging someone who is a supporter of yours. I also strongly believe that supporting this ethics proposal will translate to supporting the communities that the American Bar Association and the California Bar Association serves, particularly focusing on powerless communities and communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Penichkul.
Our next speaker is Pamela Price.
Hi, my name is Pamela Price, P-A-M-E-L-A, P-R-I-C-E. Thank you so much for having this hearing and allowing us to present to you. I ran for district attorney in Alameda County in 2018. I was the first person to challenge an incumbent prosecutor since 1963. So we have had 55 years of no contested elections for Alameda County District Attorney. I'm also an elected member of the Alameda County Democratic Party Central Committee, and we voted recently to urge all of our local politicians to pledge not to take any contributions from police or law enforcement agencies in the future. Alameda County is a case study for this rule. In 2018, in that election, police unions spent more than $200,000 to support the incumbent district attorney. She has never prosecuted an officer in Alameda County for the use of deadly force, whether it's in custody deaths or attempting to actually arrest someone. While we were in that election campaign, she accepted a $10,000 contribution from the Fremont Police Officers Union while she was investigating 2 officer-involved shootings by Fremont police officers. And one of the officers involved in that shooting is the president of the Fremont Police Officers Association. She also accepted $10,000 from the Sheriff Ahern, and he made an additional $50,000 contribution to a PAC that was formed by law enforcement agencies or law enforcement unions from across the state that spent $200,000 in our race. It was unprecedented. Alameda County has one of the worst jails in California, if not the country. Our Santa Rita County Jail has an average daily population of over 2,900 inmates over the last 5 years, and we have a 50% higher jail death rate than the Los Angeles County jail system, which is the largest in the nation. And we have not had any prosecutions arising out of any of the deaths that have occurred at Santa Rita Jail. So in Alameda County, this is there are no standards to identify conflicts uniform across the state. I did hear that question. DAs are fundamentally attorneys and should be subject to the highest standards of all. I've been a lawyer since 1983. I am a Black woman who practices civil rights law. I can tell you, as a resident of Oakland, California, our community is desperate for police accountability, and we are not getting it. Black people in Alameda County are 5 times more likely to be stopped by the police. Black and brown together, it comes up to like 9 times more likely to be stopped by the police. There is no accountability in Alameda County, and it is, unfortunately, we are not the worst. If you look at Kern County, there is no uniformity. District attorneys have incredible discretion to decide how to hold police accountability, and often they are the only ones. There's no time limits as to how long they have to investigate, who they assign to investigate. There are no rules, and this bar rule would represent a significant, powerful first step to reminding all district attorneys that you are lawyers and you have an ethical obligation to your community.
Ms.
Not
Price,
to give
there's
pressure to
15
the
seconds
police.
remaining.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to answer any questions or submit a written statement. Thank you.
Ms. Price, thank you. I think the committee would welcome a written statement. You provided some important detail. If you could refer us up to the underlying facts in your statement, right, so that we can incorporate the substance of it more readily into our analysis, that would be very helpful.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to.
We welcome a further written submission fleshing out some of the things that you said.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the subcommittee? Thank you very much, Ms. Price.
All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Joel Hale. Not sure I pronounced the first name correctly.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yoel Haile. That's Yoel Haile. I work as a criminal justice program manager for the ACLU of Northern California. Thank you all for having this hearing this morning, and I would like to submit the comments on behalf of the ACLU of California, which is the 3 affiliates of the ACLU in California. Our position in our statement is as follows. The ACLU of California, as a civil rights and civil liberties organization, has long worked on reforming the criminal legal system and holding the various actors within it, including district attorneys and law enforcement agencies, accountable. We are here today to express our support to the idea that district attorney candidates should not be allowed to directly solicit funds from any entities. California has one of the highest rates of police killings by law enforcement in the nation, with Black people and other people of color being the disproportionate victims of police murder and violence. It is to shed light on the extent of police violence and misconduct and curb the use of force that we work tirelessly with our partners to pass SB 1421, the Right to Know Act, and AB 392, the California Act to Save Lives, in the last 2 years. At the same time, District attorneys throughout the state have systematically failed to hold law enforcement officers accountable for the various crimes, including murder, that they continue to commit on members of our communities. We believe there's an inherent conflict of interest when local district attorneys try to hold local law enforcement accountable due to their close and interdependent working relationships. As has been widely documented, police associations have been significant contributors to district attorney candidates, and many district attorneys and/or candidates for that seat solicit funds for their election campaigns. We believe, therefore, we believe that district attorney candidates should not be allowed to directly solicit funds from any entity. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Steve, sorry, Steve, this is Amber. I have a follow-up question.
Good. Go ahead.
Mr. Hale. Mr. Hale, you specify that ACLU supports a ban on direct solicitation of contributions and endorsements. So in your opinion, would the proposed rule, as you envision it, prohibit DA candidates from accepting contributions and endorsements that were not specifically and directly solicited by the candidate and candidate-controlled committees and groups?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure I understand it.
Sure. You specified that the organization supports a ban on direct solicitation of contributions and endorsements by the district attorney candidates. And my question is, would the proposed rule, as you envision it, prohibit DA candidates from accepting contributions and endorsements that were not directly solicited by themselves and candidate-controlled committees and groups?
My understanding of the proposed rule is that it would prohibit funds or endorsements from specific groups or entities. What we are saying is that DA candidates should not be allowed to directly solicit funds from any entities.
But they may accept contributions and endorsements that were not specifically solicited under the rule, under the proposed rule change?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Okay, I'm sorry, is it Mr. Haile?
Haile, that's correct. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I got it right. To follow up on the question, it appears that the proposal that the ACLU supports is somewhat different from Mr. Boudin's proposal. Is that correct?
I think what we're saying is that I think the DA Boudin's proposal is to prohibit DAs or DA candidates from soliciting funds and endorsements from police unions. What we're saying is that, we support that DA should not be allowed to solicit funds from any entity.
All right, so it's broader and not targeted at police unions. And I guess the other question, and this follows up on my colleague's question, is the ACLU saying that it's a personal solicitation that's forbidden, or is it saying that a candidates committee could not make a solicitation? Those are sort of different questions as we understand them.
That's right, and we are saying direct personal solicitation
by the candidate. Okay, I think that's very helpful. I don't have any further questions. Does anyone else on the subcommittee have a question? Oh, I do have one more question, which is, you mentioned 3 affiliates. The affiliates would be
the ACLU of Northern California, the ACLU of Southern California, and the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial counties.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Haile. I think that's all we have right now.
Thank you all very much for taking on this important subject.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is just the initials MN. MN, are you still with us?
looks like they're on mute.
And when a microphone is provided for you, you can unmute yourself and you'll be able to speak. Well, if MN has maybe stepped away from the computer, we can come back. So we will not remove MN from the list, but we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Marcus K. Marcus, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Marcus K, Marcus Kaye. I'm a resident of Los Angeles, and DAs are elected by the people, and police union interests are not aligned with those of the people. The police union interests get passed on to the DAs accepting their campaign contributions. We're talking millions of dollars to keep DAs looking the other way from prosecuting officers. I won't go into Jackie Lacey's record in Los Angeles as it's already been made in public comment, but as a member of the public, the perception is certainly that she's essentially being bribed by the LA Police Union to not prosecute officers. As a matter of public perception, disallowing DA candidates from accepting police union money goes a long way ensuring faith in the justice system. I urge you to guarantee fairness, equality, and justice by taking police union money out of prosecutor elections.
Thank you, Mr. K.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Liza Money. Liza, are you with us?
I am unmuted. Thank you. Actually, my name is Liza Monet Morales. That's Lizza Monet Morales, Morales. I too am a resident of Los Angeles, California, lifelong Angelino, actually 6th generation Angelino. And I really want to thank everybody for holding space for this very important topic. Much to what Marcus has said and many others earlier today, I would like to speak at it as a resident, as someone that sees it in practicality, not just in technicality on paper. And again, Jackie Lacey, her record has already been commented on, but I also think it's equally as important to talk about Javier Becerra. We have seen this year alone cases where he has actually been asked to intervene and step up. Sean Monterosa up in the Bay being one of the cases where he actually declined. The other one locally that we've been working on and have really been affected as citizens is with Andres Guardado, where he has been asked repeatedly to also step in. And unfortunately, we have not seen him step in. And much to what others have said, that has really led to a thought that the police union in some way has some backdoor deal where they actually are having the interests of themselves and protecting the union themselves as opposed to protecting the citizens, which technically that is what they are hired to do. So I too would advocate and ask and plead on behalf of the citizens of Los Angeles and of the state, many who are actually also undocumented and many who actually don't even speak English, that fairness and equality and justice needs to actually be put ahead over money and back end door deals that are happening. And finally, I would also urge you all to consider not just what many of those in office are saying, but to really take into consideration what we, the citizens, are saying, because protecting the police is something that continues to happen. And really what 2020 has been a reckoning is that the people are done dying and the people are done being silent. So I urge you all to please do the right thing, because eyes are on you and we want to know what side of history you'll be landing on. With that, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monet Morales. Can I ask if you would, you went pretty quickly through the names of a couple of cases.
Yes,
where Attorney General Becerra had been asked to intervene.
Correct.
Failed to do so.
Yes.
Could you send those ahead to, the names of those cases ahead to State Bar staff?
Yes, I will.
So that we can pursue, we can work those facts into our analysis.
Yes, I will. And I will also send along the fact that Javier Becerra actually declined not getting involved in Sean Monterosa's case and has repeatedly ignored the requests for his involvement in Andres Guardado's case.
Well, anyway, any written materials you could submit would be welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions from members of the panel? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Reiko Sakai.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. Thank you for holding this hearing. My name is Reiko Sakai, Reiko Sakai, and I'm a resident in Monterey County, pediatrician in Salinas, California. And I'm calling to strongly support the ethics proposal to prevent the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. I agree with the points made by Mr. Boudin, Ms. Price, and others, and I hope that this committee will do everything in its power to ensure that California's elected prosecutors remain fair and impartial, in the same way that we as physicians are duty-bound not to accept gifts from money and gifts from patients, pharmaceutical companies, and other entities. Thank you for taking my comments, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Sakai.
Dr. Sakai, thank you.
Dr. Sakai.
The next speaker on our list is Alicia LaFrance.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
My name is Alicia LaFrance, spelled ALICIA-LAFRANCE. I'm a social work and public health professional and San Francisco resident, and I'm calling to support the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. Moreover, prosecutors shouldn't be indebted to law enforcement unions since debt creates a fraught relationship of bondage. This would be a good first step, and if there's a way to broaden this proposal to disallow other conflicts of interest and candidates accepting money from other groups, I would also advocate for that. I'd like to address question number 4 on the California State Bar's public hearing document about the value of adding an ethics rule. Ethical principles reflect a profession's core values and are used as a guide to professional actions. Adding an ethics rule is also an opportunity to demonstrate perceptions about a philosophy of conduct that is practiced by this profession. I agree with point of views that have already been stated by Ms. Pamela Price, DA Chesa Boudin, and Mr. Daniel Moore and others. Thank you for holding this important meeting. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance.
The next speaker on our list is William Brotherson. William, are you with us?
I am, thank you. My name is Will Brotherson, and I'm a Black public defender calling from Santa Clara County, but I am a resident of Oakland, California. I am in support of the ethics proposal, and I agree with the earlier comments articulated by Mr. Boudin from the City and County of San Francisco and Ms. Price from the City of Oakland. I want to focus my time on highlighting the real and perceived conflict of interest that police union contributions create as it relates to the unarmed killings of people of color. This is a particularly glaring problem in California. In Sacramento 2 years ago, law enforcement unions' campaign donations poured in shortly after the deadly police shooting of the unarmed Stephen Clark. In San Leandro, police union contributions again poured in mere days after the deadly police shooting of the weaponless Stephen Taylor, who was killed inside of a Walmart in April of this year. The Fremont Police Association on November 8th, 2017, donated $10,000 while the DA's office was investigating 2 separate police shootings within that department. Less than a month after that donation, the DA's office cleared Fremont PD of any wrongdoing in both of those fatal shootings. The timing of these contributions not only creates a genuine conflict of interest, but it also obviously leads to the natural distrust by the public because of the perception that innocence can be bought in the form of campaign contributions. I am a Black man, and these incidents all happened in California. These are genuine issues relevant not only to the state bar, but the genuine Black Lives Matter movement that has kind of erupted since May of this year. I appreciate the SADA's office bringing up these issues and know that they won their election despite staunch law enforcement opposition. I encourage this committee to support this proposed rule to ensure public trust in law enforcement, to ensure public trust in the state bar and the district attorney's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brotherson. Does anyone on the subcommittee have a question for Mr. Brotherson? All right, thank you.
The next speaker on our list is Jamie Wen Shore.
Hi, my name is Jamie Ewan Shore. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you very much. My name is Jamie Ewan Shore, JAMIEYUEN-SHORE, and I'm a social studies teacher in San Francisco, and I really appreciate your hearing of the California constituents about this important issue, and I don't take that for granted. With respect to those speaking about the First Amendment rights, I think they're abstracting about equality and freedom and obfuscating and failing to acknowledge the actual imbalance of power that's at play here. As a social studies teacher, I always encourage my students to look at what is actually happening rather than just what theoretically could happen, much like voter fraud and mail-in ballots and equal access to voting. It's impossible for the voices that the police officers unions speak of to organize and provide support in the form of money in the same way that the police officers union can. Often those who are most impacted by the power of police are the most vulnerable, disenfranchised, and lacking in access to a voice in the form of money. As I've learned from my support of SB 731, California is one of only 5 states that does not have a decertification process for peace officers who have used excessive force. Professions such as barbers and doctors do have decertification. This ethics proposal is similarly a way for us to impose on DA candidates the same kind of professional code that we expect from other professions. When we talk about freedom, we fail to acknowledge the actual imbalance of power that is current in the laws. If current laws were effectively protecting everyone equally, we would not be seeing the inequality and lack of accountability we are today. We're clearly in need of more stringent rules to hold police accountable, and I think that this is one step that could do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions from the subcommittee? Okay, thank you.
The next speaker on our list is Julian Sarkar.
Give me 1 second. I need to find them on the list. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Go ahead, Julian.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good
Yes.
morning. My name is Julian Sarkar. I represent tenants in San Francisco as well as attorney applicants against the State Bar of California's fraudulent and white supremacist attorney admission system. However, my views today are my own and not in my representative capacity. I'm here today to support the proposed ethics rule. It's very clear that District Attorney Chesa Boudin is a man of value and integrity to be here today proposing an ethics rule that would prevent him from accepting money from police organizations that would stand to benefit the most. It must be an extremely undue influence that prevents District Attorney Boudin from even acknowledging reports of criminal activity by the directors, officers, employees, and agents of the State Bar of California in furtherance of its fraudulent and discriminatory attorney admissions practices. It must be an extremely undue influence that would make District Attorney Jackie Lacey immediately respond to these reports by very gladly and very quickly disclaiming jurisdiction over the State Bar's crimes, learning that they all occurred here in the State Bar's lavish San Francisco Financial District building. Because the State Bar of California fights any California Public Records Act requests to the death in our local courts, it's impossible for me to fully understand what that undue influence is. All I can see is that the paychecks of Mr. Boudin himself and all the employees at his office are paid by none other than the trustee, San Francisco Treasurer Jose Cisneros. So in summary, these reports, I won't go into it too much because it's not directly relevant. They involve the State Bar of California's agents in the electronic tampering with attorney applications belonging to my clients and other attorney applicants by retroactively reducing their previous exam scores without notice, without any kind of authorization, and being asked about these violations of the Computer Data Access and Fraud Act violations, the State Bars, it just said, it is concluded that the first score is correct. That wouldn't be a very good look if a bank was trying to explain why your account balance was going down, but it's good enough for the State Bar, because it has some kind of complete immunity from the penal code and any other criminal violations, which include perjurious declarations about its previous interference with attorney applications and other misrepresentations of the Committee of Bar Examiners proceedings, which have created different rules to change its policies for deceiving the public regarding its $20 million a year attorney admission scheme. So I want to respond to some of the opponents that spoke earlier against this rule by saying, both as an attorney, also as a former Marine, by saying sometimes the better play is to just try to find maybe an alternative, non-monetary way to achieve the change that you want to see in the world, that it's not going to reflect as poorly on you potentially as a Take for example the state bar, which also has a similar notion of its own free speech rights. Spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on lobbyists and alcohol to spend with to enjoy with those lobbyists in order to expand its power and influence as this unauthorized fourth branch of government. So as a result, the state bar is not a respected organization. So I would ask you to reconsider your public positions in opposing this rule, to not end up in the same position as a state bar. Again, I'm here to support District Attorney Boudin in the creation or in the enactment of this proposed ethics rule. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkar.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is just a phone number, and the phone number is 831-238-4066.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Malik, and I'm a resident of Los Angeles, and I am calling in support of this proposal. I would like to reference an earlier opponent of this proposal who invoked Citizens United, and I think that is a really great example of somebody using a technicality to enforce their power over something and to try to hold on to that power. And I think that we really need to acknowledge the power imbalance that is happening in the voices that are being heard and being sponsored in these races. The fact that 95% of DA race campaign funding comes from police unions speaks volumes to the imbalance of the voices that are actually heard in this space. And it absolutely ensures that a DA will listen and bend their ear more to whatever the police might want in their interests, in how they prosecute people besides police officers as well in those cases. And in the case of Kenneth Ross Jr., I think that is a really good example of somebody who, he was an armed Black man, but he was running away from the cops. And this is where we get into an instance of someone being gunned down, running away, the gunshot entered the back, and nobody should die as a suspect. They should absolutely have all sorts of measures put in place to help somebody be brought into custody without losing their life so that they can be reprimanded appropriately. And beyond that, and that's Jackie Lacey is responsible for that as well. And so, and everything else I have to say is just in support of points that were already made. So I yield my time, and thank you very much for hearing this. I was very surprised to hear that this proposal was being heard at all. So I appreciate that this is being brought.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Sam Miller.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Sam Miller, and I am calling from San Francisco, California. I am calling to support the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arise when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. I would like to speak to one of the comments that was made earlier against this proposal, saying that police unions do not pick sides in a DA race or do not pick candidates. During the 2019 DA race here with Chesa Boudin, we saw the police union in San Francisco spend $654,000 in attack ads against Chesa. This is a direct choice from the police union to pick a candidate. I don't see how DAs can maintain how they could be impartial if they are funding a candidate and supporting directly a district attorney. I would also like to state that 95% of all elected prosecutors receive donations and support from law enforcement unions. And over the past 10 years, 98.5% of police that kill in the line of duty are not prosecuted. Thank you. That is all I have. I'll cede my time.
Mr. Miller, thank you. If you could send us the sources for the numerical references you made, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I would.
If you could send them ahead to State Bar staff, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Maxwell Zabo.
Hey there, are you guys able to hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you so much for hosting this meeting. It's incredibly an important topic. Again, my name is Maxwell Zabo, and just in accordance with your guidance, my last name is spelled S as in Sam, Z as in zebra, A as in apple, B as in boy, O as in Oscar. I'm actually calling this morning on behalf of George Gascon, who's one of the authors of this important proposal before you, and I'm a longtime aide of his. And Mr. Gascon is both a former prosecutor and a former police union member, and he wanted me to reiterate his support for this important proposal. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is actually Mr. Vern Pearson, who came on and spoke on behalf of CDAA earlier, is kind of a perfect example of why this is such an important proposal. Mr. Pearson is fully backed by law enforcement unions, both politically and in his election. And just a quick Google search reveals that I performed while on this call reveals that the entire board of the California District Attorneys Association is backed by law enforcement unions, both politically and very likely, I know that many of them going to be financially supported by them as well. So they've also, CDA has partnered with law enforcement unions to oppose most of the criminal justice reform initiatives that have gone through the legislature and that the voters have faced over the course of the past 10 years. So as such, CDAA as an organization, since their board is entirely backed by law enforcement and these are elected officials, would appear to have a conflict in this matter that they probably should have disclosed to this body. And the fact that they didn't disclose is a living example of how these conflicts occur and how it'd be better to separate the two. I also wanted to briefly correct the record on one of the points related to the fact that this is a partisan approach. In fact, the coalition of district attorneys that put this forward is actually bipartisan. And additionally, that's seemingly irrelevant, being as though candidates for the office of district attorney is a nonpartisan office. On the topic of why DA's proposals covered law enforcement unions specifically and not other organizations, I think it's really important to note that all organizations don't actually, members of all organizations or other unions, for example, don't have an abundance of cases involving their members that will be reviewed by a district attorney. Many district attorney's office will have scores of cases that will come under their review as it pertains to investigations related to misconduct of police officers that may involve misconduct or excessive force, but it can also just be other types of misconduct as well. And other organizations don't have that number of cases involving their members that are going to come before the union. So it's not nearly as significant of a problem, and it's not nearly as pervasive. Additionally, on the First Amendment issues that were raised, I just want to reiterate that district attorneys, the restriction is on district attorneys and their solicitation of financial and political support from law enforcement unions. It's not on the unions themselves. Unions would still be able to spend in support or in opposition of their preferred candidates in accordance with their First Amendment rights. And this really has to do with the conflict for the prosecutor, not the conflict for the police unions. They can still spend as they so choose. But really, when prosecutors both solicit that endorsement and solicit those funds, and they take those funds, that's when the conflict arises rather. And we hope that this body will cure this conflict by making it a very clear rule of professional responsibility that prosecutors cannot take cannot solicit the endorsement and/or financial contributions from these unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabo. Does anyone from the subcommittee have a question? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you again.
Okay, great. The next speaker on our list is Deborah Patricia Polson. Deborah, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm a novice to this, and I'm just a citizen. I'm not a lawyer or anything like these other people that were speaking. So please bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous. This is a very personal issue for me, and I so support this issue because, let me explain briefly with my situation. I contacted the Ethics and Integrity Unit here in San Bernardino County regarding my son's case. And I thought it was a different entity, but I come to find out they never even told me this, but it just goes right to the Internal Affairs Unit. Well, I received a letter from the Internal Affairs Unit, and it stated that they found nothing wrong. Well, they didn't do a very good investigation because we got the forensic back, and the forensic states that, yes, the videotape has been altered and tampered with, and it's not motion censored. In my son's case a year ago, he was going grocery shopping when he was approached by 3 bikers, and they started beating him and assaulting him. He defended himself and unfortunately shot one of them, which we did not know, never heard of, a person who just got out of prison doing 12 years. My son has no priors. That night of the incident, the policeman watched the long-running video at the grocery store and determined it was self-defense. 101 self-defense, that's what all the sheriffs up here in San Bernardino County told me. He was a free man for a whole month until the 2 remaining bikers, who are felons and have 17 charges against them, 3 felonies, and one of them just got arrested again for robbery and assault and great bodily injury. He went down and lied to Officer Ogas. Well, we already had the pretrial, but because of this coronavirus, my son is not able to have his speedy trial. It's been continuously being postponed, and he's still being locked up, an innocent man. Thanks to, even though I'm poor, I'm really upset because I feel the police are policing themselves. And I'm learning all these things daily. And I just learned about this issue, and I'm appalled because, to me, in layman's term, it's really bribery. The police union are bribing the prosecutors, and they're getting away with it. And it's just too much power. They should not have immunity. No one should be above the law. And during the pretrial, David Rabb, prosecutor, threw Janetta Ringhofer under the bus and stated he got the video from her. I live in a small town in Lake Arrowhead where the rumors up here were saying that this Janetta Ringhofer, which I never met or heard of, was going around saying that she was going to do whatever it takes to get my son in behind bars because she was friends with the family of the person who passed away. She also stated she would be the last nail in his coffin, and whoever got his case, she was going to help him. Well, poor David Rabb, I knew the guy didn't do this because when it came time to do the pretrial, he did not show the video because a newspaper article came out saying that I stated that the tape was altered. I was blessed to speak with Brendan Sullivan. I'm sure all of you attorneys know who Brendan Sullivan is. He is an incredible man who...
15 seconds remaining.
Okay. I just feel this is so wrong in so many ways, it's not even funny. How can prosecutors show tampered evidence and cut out the part that would exonerate my son? How can this be happening where they're getting bribed by the police union to not throw them under the bus? It's just too much what's going on, what I'm watching. It's literally a nightmare that I'm living. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. I got Mark Garicos to take on my case pro bono. And I want to repeat, I got the forensic back, and it has been tampered with and altered. And my son still sits in jail. I don't understand how the system works. I used to believe in it. I used to respect police officers, but I don't no longer. Especially the officer who killed that Kennedy guy at Costco while shopping at Costco and shot his parents and put them in a coma. And he's walking free and just got fired a year later. I mean, no, he should be behind bars shooting those innocent people. Not my son who defended himself, and now they cut up the video that would prove his innocence. So yes, I'm very, very personally upset with this whole thing, and I thank you so much for listening to me. And I thank Mr. Boudin for doing this issue is so crucially important because you should not be putting innocent people in jail. You should be putting away that biker who lied and now got arrested again for burglary, his 3rd or 4th felony, and has like 23 cases against him. Not my son who has no priors and was just defending himself against these bikers. And I wish ACLU would contact me again because they called me and left their name, but when I call,
Paulson,
nobody knows who I'm calling.
To conclude your
All right, sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're sorry for your incident. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
God is good. You'll see. I got Mark Garicos. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson. Our next speaker is Sonia Wang or Wang.
Can I just pause for 1 second before Ms. Wang testifies? How many people do we have in the queue right now, Mimi?
Give me 1 second. We have about I would say about 13.
Oh, great. Okay, well, we're going to, we're scheduled to go to 1 o'clock. It looks to me that if we have 13 people in the queue, we should be okay to finish before 1. I just wanted to check and see where we stood. All right, I think we can go forward with that. Thank you very much, Mimi.
No problem.
Okay, Sonia, if you're available,
Yes,
this is
here.
your turn. Okay,
Can-
great.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sonia. I'm a constituent calling from San Francisco. As a former UC Irvine researcher who has examined racial inequalities and structural disparities in the juvenile legal system, I'm calling to support the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. So allowing police unions to give money to prosecutors is essentially like having a student giving money to a teacher before they grade their test. There's an enormous amount of implicit bias at play here, whether or not there is an explicit intention of the police union to donate money and influence the politics. So if people are concerned that police unions are being singled out as a special interest group that aren't allowed to give money, and allegedly deeming that this proposal is unconstitutional, then this warrants a larger conversation about campaign finance reform and separating money from politics entirely. And in response to Brian Marvel's comment about how this proposal may impact 1% of the potentially reviewed cases, I mean, that 1% still impacts several people's lives. I don't have a specific number, but I mean, to just reduce people's lives to quantified numbers just kind of feels like it's ignoring the real life impacts that it has on these individuals' lives. So I just wanted to voice my support for Chesa Boudin's proposal, and thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Aitak Muradi.
Hi there.
Hello, we can hear you. Please begin.
My name is Aitak Muradi, I-T-A-K-M-O-R-A-D-I, and I am an attorney. I've been licensed here in the state since 2016, and I'm calling in to voice my strong support for the proposed regulation. I think it's really important that we move forward on, explicitly precluding prosecutors and prosecutor candidates from seeking or accepting or otherwise soliciting support from law enforcement unions. And this is just one way that we need to avoid the conflicts of interest that we encounter in our criminal justice system. It's quite frankly an obvious conflict of interest to me that would arise when our prosecutors are indebted to law enforcement unions through, campaign financing or endorsement or some other underwriting of political support. And I don't think it's lost on many that 95% of elected prosecutors receive donations and support from police unions, and even more than that percentage, 98.5% of police who kill in the line of duty are not then prosecuted. And like I said, I'm an attorney, I'm a civil litigator, but I want to echo other comments that have been made here today that I'm also, of course, an average citizen. And we are really facing a moment of public reckoning with respect to police accountability in this country and how we fail to prosecute police misconduct. So this really is a moment for the State Bar to step in recognition of that sentiment, of that public sentiment, and make a powerful step toward creating structural change that will move our field in the right direction and that will encourage public trust in the institutions that are at stake. Thank you for your time, and thank you for holding this public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Muradi.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Nick Musney.
Hello, my name is Nick Musny. That's my full name, Nicholas, Nicholas. Last name Musny, Musni. I am a resident of Alameda County, and I grew up in Monterey County. And I just wanted to speak to, in support of this proposal to cure the conflict between campaign contributions to district attorney offices and races from police unions. This is not a partisan issue. It is a way of ensuring the unbiased application of the law. District attorneys and prosecutors represent the public, not law enforcement in their pursuit of justice. And to the comment, I forget the gentleman saying that nobody is saying we are, police are donating so that way they won't get prosecuted. Of course that they won't say that. It is an implicit agreement by contributing these funds. For example, in 2014 in Monterey County, our DA at the time, Dean Flippo, who served 7 terms uncontested until he retired, there were 8 shootings by police, and none of them were ever brought to trial. And I think Dean Filippo said that in some way that even if somebody were to kind of look back at that moment and say that they acted, out of reason, of self-defense for reasonable threat, that they acted unreasonably, they still will not get prosecuted. So there's this immunity given to police officers by DAs that needs to be broken. And the way to do that is to stop this contribution from police unions. And talking about that this isn't a Black Lives Matter issue, it is. Our criminal justice system disproportionately affects and incarcerates and uses force against our Black community. Though, California has a 6% Black population, 16% are taken, 16% of the people taken into custody are Black, almost 3 times the amount of the general population. 27% are incarcerated due to this. That's almost 5 times the percent of the general population. And talking about, holding police accountable in this moment of reckoning of justice within our state and with our country, within the world. Sean Monterosa, Vallejo police were accused, and there's evidence, brought to the district attorney that they destroyed the windshield from which they shot through, destruction of evidence, and yet the DA there is dragging their feet on this investigation. The bias and the connections and the support between the DA and the police when this relationship should be neutral is completely evident throughout. Yeah, it's completely evident throughout multiple cases through statistics and history. So we need to prioritize Black and brown lives and really hold our police accountable. And this is the way, one of the many ways to do it, and an extremely important way, and I'm in full support of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musny.
Thank you. Just a friendly reminder, we definitely want to hear from everybody and register your positions. If someone has said something previously that you support, you can state that you endorse comments made by someone who's spoken before you, and your voice will still be heard, and your statement in support or in opposition will still be counted. I only share this friendly reminder in the spirit of conserving time. The next speaker on our list is Liz. Liz, are you with us?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Trejo, Elizabeth, Trejo, Trejo. And today, I just want to say thank you for having this conversation and possibly considering this proposal. So I am calling to support the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement and union money. My family is victims of police brutality. In 2008, my brother was shot in our front doorsteps by Upland Police Department in San Bernardino County. I just want to say thank you for everybody that's been engaging. I think there is an imbalance of power, and I think the minimum that we could do is propose a code of ethics that does not, that looks frown upon those kind of donations. I see that a lot of police unions and police departments during elections, they go really hard on sending out mailers from endorsed candidates. I also want to bring up to the attention a lot of Facebook groups. One that I've been monitoring is Pomona Patch. They also start donating. I mean, they start endorsing candidates. So again, it's just an imbalance of power. The attorney that ended up defending the police department was somebody who was a former police officer. My family didn't get any justice. The minimum that this body can do to give us justice and defend our constitutional rights is to limit that kind of funding or that kind of donation. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trejo.
Okay. The next speaker on our list is Christine DeBerry.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much to the committee for hearing this important matter. I'm both a former public defender and now a prosecutor serving for over 10 years in San Francisco and currently serving as the chief of staff. And in that role, I have seen the desperate need for this type of limitations. I'd like to make three main points to this committee today. One, that there is an important state interest that motivates this request and is balanced with the First Amendment. Second, that prosecutors are in a unique role compared to other elected officials. And third, the police relationship to prosecutors is unlike that of any other party in the system. Relating to the First Amendment, this request, tailored closely to the Williams-Ewell, Y-U-L-E-E versus Florida bar, is similarly crafted as the rule there held by the Supreme Court to be legal because of the unique role of judicial candidates. The analysis here that prosecutorial candidates hold a similar role to judicial candidates and the need for them to administer justice and be an impartial party will be critical for this committee to evaluate and explore. Specifically, the court held in Williams that the First Amendment did not bar a Florida ethical rule that prohibited judicial candidates from personally soliciting campaign funds and from personally soliciting attorneys for publicly stated support. Second, a prosecutor's role is unlike that of other elected officials, such as mayors or board supervisor members, because of their role in law enforcement. Law enforcement, as we all know, is not automatic. It is not blind. It is administered by a district attorney and by other members of the criminal justice system. And one of the greatest difficulties in a role like this, as I have seen in my time, is that it requires the selection of cases. Not every case that is brought to a prosecutor is pursued. And if a prosecutor is obligated to choose his or her cases, it follows that they then choose their defendants. Therein is the most dangerous power of a prosecutor and one that requires very careful regulation. Third, law enforcement is unlike any other group in the criminal justice system. Our focus here is on the law enforcement unions because of that unique role. Essentially 100% of cases that a district attorney will bring forward for prosecution depend on police witnesses. Similarly, when police are investigated for misconduct, that is an evaluation conducted by the district attorney outside of the courtroom process through their own staff and decision-making. During those investigations, the suspected officers are often represented and supported by their union, including being present during questioning and paying for legal representation of those members. They are the single most predictable contributor to prosecutor candidates in electoral settings.
You have 15 seconds remaining.
Vehement attacks when they disagree. I'll conclude by citing another Supreme Court case, Berger versus United States, indicating that prosecutors are the representatives not of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all. We're asking the bar to implement this limitation to limit problematic contributions through an ethical rule to protect not only prosecutor integrity, policing, but most importantly, the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barry.
Okay, our next speaker is Julinar Williams. I believe your colleague already spoke. So you're free to speak if you'd like, but if your colleague had already shared the same sentiment that you were going to share, just let us know.
Yes, my colleague Yoel already spoke, so I endorse his comments.
Okay, thank you. We will register that. Then the next speaker is Olympia Francis Taylor.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect, okay. So hi, my name is Olympia and I'm calling from San Francisco. That's Olympia, and then my last name is Francis Taylor, FrancisTaylor. Thank you so much for taking the time to consider this important issue. I am calling to voice my strong support for the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. Over the past 20 years, law enforcement unions have spent $87 million on local and state elections alone. Over that same period, law enforcement unions spent over $47 million in federal elections. It is clear that law enforcement unions see prosecutorial campaign contributions as a worthy investment. Law enforcement unions are spending over $6 million every year for a reason. Law enforcement unions are calling in, sending letters, and deeply invested in fighting this proposal for a reason. I think it's really important to ask, what is that reason? Why are law enforcement unions so afraid to lose if this, what are law enforcement unions so afraid to lose if this ethics proposal passes? Based on the fact that prosecutors rarely, if ever, prosecute police officers, I think that answer is clear. And based on the fact that 98.5% of police who kill in the line of duty are never prosecuted, I think that answer remains clear. Right now, in the consideration of this proposal, the California State Bar has an opportunity to be a global and national leader in the fight for criminal justice reform and police and prosecutorial accountability. You and every member of this board has an opportunity to ensure that California's prosecutors are genuinely independent in their pursuit of justice on behalf of the people of California. You have an opportunity to earn faith and trust in California's criminal justice system. I join many, many others calling in and asking that you take this opportunity, cure this conflict of interest, and bar law enforcement officers and unions from donating to prosecutors' races. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Francis Taylor.
The next speaker on our list is Rachel Marshall.
Hi, my name is Rachel Marshall, Marshall from San Francisco, and I have been a lawyer and a member of the California Bar for about a decade. I worked as a public defender in Alameda County for 8 years, and I currently work at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, and I'm calling in strong support for this ethics proposal. I will echo DA Boudin and Ms. DeBerry's comments about the constitutionality of this rule. I want to thank the committee for holding public comment, and I have been moved by the overwhelming support for this proposal and believe this is an opportunity for the bar to show that it values integrity in our law enforcement institutions. I also listened to the very few comments against the ethics proposal earlier this morning and believe that they only demonstrate what a strong need there is for this proposal, because law enforcement unions are far too accustomed to being able to try to influence prosecutorial decisions by donating what's often millions of dollars to DA candidates. The role of police money in prosecutorial races deeply taints the independence of our elected prosecutors and calls into question decisions that prosecutors make about when, if, and how to prosecute police officers. And I want to emphasize that what's different about police union support for prosecutors, as opposed to other organized financial support that elected prosecutors may receive, is that prosecutors will undoubtedly have to review use of force incidents involving police union members. Police unions should not be allowed to influence those decisions. This is a moment in our country in which the public is demanding change and accountability from our institutions. As has been already described today, California suffers from far too many police shootings, and disproportionately those victims of police violence are people of color and Black people. and yet police officers are frequently not held accountable by prosecutors. The lack of public faith in our institutions is not surprising, as how can the public trust any decisions prosecutors make about whether and how to prosecute officers when they know that those same prosecutors have accepted money from those officers' unions? The California Bar should hold prosecutors to the highest of standards because we expect all lawyers who make decisions without conflicts of interest, and it's only more important when it comes to prosecutors who represent the public. This is the time when the public needs assurance that police will be held accountable when necessary, and it is only when prosecutors are not indebted to law enforcement unions that the public can truly be confident in the decisions prosecutors make about holding police officers accountable. I hope this committee supports this important proposal to build trust in the integrity of prosecutors, to promote prosecutorial independence, and to ensure that prosecutors hold police accountable. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marshall.
The next speaker on our list is a phone number that ends with the digits 1170.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Jason Yeagle. The first name is Jason. The last name is Jagel. I'm a public artist and educator in San Francisco. I endorse all of the comments in support of this reform. I think I don't have anything further to say except that to label this issue a partisan issue, I think obfuscates the critical need for criminal justice reform, law enforcement reform, prosecutorial reform in this country. It doesn't take much research to find out what a critical imbalance there is in our systems, in those systems. And I know that I am one of millions of Californians who support exactly this type of reform. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Paul. Paul, are you with us?
He's muted.
Paul, you should see a microphone appear, and once you see that, you should be able to
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, Ethics Commission. I wanted to firstly say, as a resident of San Francisco, I wanted to echo
Paul,
Yes.
Can you say your name for the record?
Sure. My name is Paul Breed. My name is Paul Breed.
The last name how?
My last name is B-R-E-E-D, Bravo, Romeo, Echo, Echo, Delta.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm a resident and a constituent in San Francisco, and I'm calling today to echo the commentary made by my district attorney. I was proud to support him before his election, and I think what he's proposing here is exactly what's necessary. You see thousands of people out demonstrating in the streets about how unaccountable the police are. And key and center to that accountability is their belief and their behavior that they are above the law. Central in this is their use of money to purchase district attorneys' elections. I really have a personal knowledge of this after experiencing it in San Francisco. The San Francisco Police Officers Association had made absolute untruths about Chesa during the election. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to attempt to throw him out. It was not clearly in their interests, and yet they were using hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote something. If that isn't a conflict of interest, if spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to make yourself as an organization not accountable and above the law isn't illegal and isn't unethical, I don't know what is. Now, your commentary is that they have the right to to free speech, and I kind of agree with that one. But I think there's a really unique relationship here. And I think that that unique relationship is demonstrated by the people demonstrating on the streets about the fact that the police can mercilessly beat them. I think that's demonstrated by the tens of thousands of protesters saying that Black Lives Matter, and they don't seem to the police. Now, what this means is that the system of law no longer has the respect of constituents such as myself. I don't think law is moral. I don't think the system of law and criminal justice in our country is ethical. I think it's
You have
immoral.
10 seconds remaining, Mr. Breed.
And central to that belief is this conflict of interest, and the conflict of interests that have created things like our private prison industry. And those union representatives making this legislative change to have more work and to incarcerate and brutalize more people.
Thank you, Mr. Breed.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is, well, again, I just want to make another friendly reminder. We have an hour to go. There are roughly 15 people still on the list to speak. Again, if someone has stated a comment that you endorse or support or would state similarly, we ask that you refer to that previous comment and say that you endorse it. If you have a specific response to the list of questions that the committee has put forth as part of this public hearing, we are especially attuned to hearing responses to that. And we also wish for everyone who's online and in the list to be able to register their support and opposition. So we wish for everyone to speak just in the spirit of conserving time. If someone has said something that you're going to be saying that is similar, we request that you just refer to those prior comments. And with that, the next speaker is a telephone number. The last four digits are 2866. Is 2866 with us?
Sorry, I had to unmute them, but they should be unmuted now.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Aidan Thawley, spelled A-I-D-A-N, and my last name is T-H-A-W-L-E-Y. I'm calling from San Francisco. I'm an after-school teacher here and a community activist, and I'd like to say I wholeheartedly support this ethics proposal and also endorse the comments made by Chesa Boudin and Pamela Price. And I'd like to focus on the absolute miscarriages of justice that happen when this conflict of interest continues. I went to high school with Sean Monterosa, and we are the same age, and the amount of disrespect and the amount of injustice that is being carried out because of these fund contributions that police unions make is just disgusting, and an absolute power imbalance that means no one gets the justice they deserve. I once again say that I endorse Chesa Boudin's statements, and that's all I can say on that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thawley.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is also a phone number, and the phone number ends in the four digits of 8749.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jonah Storr, S-T-O-R-R, and I'm calling to strongly endorse this ethics proposal. I'm a resident of California, of Los Angeles, and I believe that the unique role and discretion that prosecutors have within our justice system means that they also have to be constrained, and we have to pay attention to that in a unique way so as to ensure that justice can be applied impartially. And I think that the ability of police unions to influence prosecutorial conduct and influence how they decide to employ their discretion is an inherent bias within the system, and it's only furthered by allowing police unions this unilateral freedom to donate to, and influence elections. And so I'm going to endorse all of the previous comments in support of this proposal. And with that, I'll keep the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storr.
The next speaker on our list is Kelsey Russum. Or Rassam.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Russum, R-U-S-S-O-M, and I'm calling from San Francisco to speak in support of the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arises when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. Prosecutors must be independent in deciding when and who to prosecute. To do this, they must be free of influence from special interest groups. When California's prosecutors are indebted to law enforcement unions that finance their campaigns, endorse their candidacy, and underwrite their political support, a conflict of interest exists. It becomes hard to trust prosecutors to make decisions regarding officers fairly. Prosecutors will undoubtedly review use of force incidents involving officers who belong to police unions. Police unions should not be allowed to influence those decisions. We need a rule to explicitly preclude prosecutors' candidates from seeking or accepting support from law enforcement unions, as it is the only way we can avoid conflicts of interest and ensure independence on the part of our elected prosecutors. It will also enhance trust in our criminal justice system at a time when it is sorely needed. 95% of all elected prosecutors receive donations and support from law enforcement unions. And over the past 10 years, 98.5% of police that kill in the line of duty are not prosecuted. This suggests a link between the support prosecutors receive from law enforcement and their reluctance to prosecute the police. Law enforcement unions spend over $6 million on elections every year. The prosecutors must be free from such influence in deciding when to prosecute police officers. Allowing police unions to donate to prosecutors is like having one baseball team's union donate to an empire. It's hard to be unbiased when judging your supporter. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker on our list is Cameron Bird.
Hi there, Cameron Bird. I'm a first-year law student at Berkeley Law School. I'm calling in strong support of the proposed rule. Most of my sentiments and support for the rule have been expressed already, but I'll just want to add that as a lawyer in training and a public defender in training, I'm struck by the weight given to considerations around conflicts of interest regarding prosecutors, with little regard given to the ways in which defendants in indigent circumstances rarely receive the same kind of deference. And knowing the far disproportionate number of people of color and poor people who are injured, murdered by police, and the far disproportionate number of people who are punished on that side of the equation compared to the number of police officers who are held accountable and protected by sort of codes of silence and secrecy, it strikes me that the rhetoric of folks who have spoken up against this proposed rule, deferring to free speech rights and First Amendment rights, to portray a knowledge of the influence that police wield over prosecutors, and an influence that oftentimes prosecutors use as a shield for themselves. And so I think the ethics of this are pretty clear. There are many ways to squirrel out of creating a bright line rule, but I trust that you will make the right decision here and institute this proposed rule. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bird.
Thank you. Next speaker is a telephone number. The last four digits are 2013.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Can you hear
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Hi there. So, my name is Stephanie Federoff, Stephanie, last name Federoff. I'm a constituent in the 14th District of Los Angeles, and I have a few things to say about this. First of all, some undeniable facts. Public perception is terrible right now. Like, that's undeniable to say that we as the public look at police unions being able to donate to district attorneys as highly suspect, especially the timeliness of some of these donations, where we can see in these not isolated incidents, police unions donating to district attorneys immediately following police-involved shootings. You know, if you think about it, if any other defendant or suspect did this, donated to the district attorney while they were under investigation, that would be highly suspect as well, and I'm sure would be grounds for some sort of outside investigation. To address some of the things that I've heard people bring up, which also I want to note that it's kind of laughable hearing statements in defense of the ability to donate from police unions to district attorneys only from people representing police unions or district attorneys groups. Like, wow, okay, you really want us to let you make that decision? I've heard some people call it unconstitutional, which to me is a little bit ridiculous, seeing as the fact that we've been amending this document since its inception. It's always changing as we change and grow. And when we see something that's incorrect and that we're doing wrong, we should correct it. I've heard people speak to, well, we can't just ban the police union from doing this unless we ban everyone from doing this. And until that's a thing, we can't. Well, why should we be waiting for it to be mandated? If we know that something is wrong, we should hold ourselves to that higher standard and not wait for someone to tell us that we have to do it. As far as the officers having a voice, having their First Amendment right heard, every single one of those individuals has that ability to endorse the candidate of their choice in the form of their vote. They have that right. If any group at all deserves a group to represent their interests with regards to the election of a DA, it's the prisoners who've been incarcerated many times unjustly and have had that voice stripped away.
Yeah,
Cops
15
don't need
seconds
a double
remaining.
set. Thank you very much. I appreciate you hearing me out on this. I hope I've given you some food for thought. And, you know, in closing, I'll just say a labor union is an organization, by definition, that acts as an intermediary between its members and the business that employs them. The DA is not the business that employs the cops. We, the people, are that. And if they want to give money to anyone, it should be us. So thank you. I yield the remainder of what time I have.
Thank you, Ms. Fedros.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jeremy Garrett.
Oh, no
Hello?
questions.
Hello?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Garrett,
Hello?
yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Garrett. I'm a public defender in San Bernardino County. I am in support of the ethics proposal. I would just like to state a personal experience I had while working as a public defender here in San Bernardino County. One, it should be noted that the San Bernardino County Public Defender's Office has a policy, or District Attorney's Office has a policy in which they do not dismiss 148s, which are delaying, obstructing, or resisting peace officer cases. It is their policy not to dismiss them even where the facts of the case call for it, because it is their policy to protect the officers, perhaps in a civil suit. So while working as a public defender, I was privy to a conversation between a district attorney and an attorney for a client or a defendant who was charged with a 148 resisting, delaying, or obstructing a peace officer. Well, this particular defendant was in fact a police officer who was being charged with this when he was off duty. I sat there as the district attorney's office called in numerous supervisors and other district attorneys to discuss how they could resolve the case without this officer losing his job or somehow losing some kind of a pension. And it's ironic because when I bring up my clients' jobs or things that they need in favor of a better resolution, the response I get from the DA's office is, well, your client should have thought about that job prior to doing acts A, B, or C. Yet when the officer, who is now a defendant, is charged with the exact same charge, they are bringing in everyone possible to try and figure out how to save this gentleman's job. And in all reality, I mean, that's unfair and it's biased. So allowing these district attorneys to continue to get money from these police unions will do nothing more but further these kind of discussions, which quite honestly are unfair and very biased. And with that, I will yield my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Any questions from the subcommittee?
The next speaker is Galen Spohr.
He's on mute.
Galen, if you can unmute.
Sorry. There we go.
Yeah.
First Zoom from the phone. So my name is Galen, Gaelan, last name Spohr, S-P-O-R. That's a she, her designation. I am calling as a constituent of D10 in San Francisco, and I am calling in support of my district attorney's proposal. This is what we have been needing. I second so many things that have been mentioned by people previously. Well, let's see, I liked what Paul Reed said. I liked what Prosecutor Pamela, whose last name I can't remember, said, the person who spoke just now before me, the defender from San Bernardino made excellent points. Thank you so much for taking the time to make this resolution happen. And I hope that we can continue to make strides in this direction. I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Spohr.
The next speaker on our list is Monica J.
Hi, Monica Jaramillo. Good afternoon, Ethics Commission, and thank you so much for having this today. Monica Jaramillo, M-O-N-I-C-A-J-A-R-A-M-I-L-L-O. I am from the County of Los Angeles, and I'm in support of the ethics proposal. Los Angeles has the dishonor of having the highest incarceration rate of any county in the free world. And as a Latina, I'm particularly bothered to see how Black and Brown communities are unjustly targeted by police, and the police use the connections of the police union and the DA more often than not to ensure police are not held accountable. Mass incarceration disappropriately affects young men and women of color. It's disenfranchising them. It's giving them a scarlet letter that they'll never be able to shake. It'll affect their ability to get jobs, to get housings, to be able to vote, and to be able to participate in society potentially forever. I agree with others in support that this is a complete conflict of interest. It's very clear to see how this creates systematic problems that affect all of us. And with that, I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Jaramillo.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Brianna Ruiz.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Brianna Ruiz, last name spelled R-U-I-Z. I am also a public defender in San Bernardino County, but I think along with my colleague, Mr. Garrett, I believe everything that he says and I support everything that he says. I have a little bit of a unique perspective because as well as being a public defender, I was born and raised by a police officer. My dad is a police sergeant here in the state of California. I was raised around law enforcement officers, and I can tell you for a fact when these officers think that you are one of them, when they think that they are behind closed doors and nothing that they say will affect them, they really open up. And I've heard countless statements by police officers all throughout the state saying for a fact that they know if anything happens to them, their police union will back them. They will not get prosecuted. Their union will come by to support them. And I think that is the biggest problem that we have, and which is why I wholeheartedly support this proposal. One specific example I can give is recently we all saw the George Floyd tragedy unveil on the news. We saw the video, and instead of feeling bad, instead of feeling remorseful like most of the country felt, comments I heard from police officers were, wow, the officers who were placed on leave didn't have a strong police union because our union wouldn't have done that. So that's just, I don't know how true that is. I don't know how accurate that is, but that is to give some insight into the mind that these police officers have and how powerful these unions are. And I think it's a big problem and something that needs to be fixed. So with that, I yield my time.
Thanks, Ms. Louise.
The next speaker is Johansson Anderson. Is Johansson with us?
He's on mute.
Johansson, if you can unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you, and it is your turn to speak. Okay, Mr. Anderson, we will come back to you. We're going to move on in the spirit of preserving time. And the next speaker on our list is Trang Nguyen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Trang Nguyen. That's Trang. Last name is Nguyen, and I'm calling from Oakland, California. I'm calling to support the ethics proposal to cure the conflict of interest that arise when prosecutors accept law enforcement union money and support. I currently work with incarcerated youth in San Francisco. I support youth in the juvenile justice system with their reentry back into the community. Working with Black and Brown youth who are directly impacted by police biases, misconduct, and brutality, and I strongly believe that prosecutors should be free of influence from special interest groups. When California's prosecutors are indebted to law enforcement unions that finance their campaigns, endorse their candidacy, and underwrite their political support, a conflict of interest exists. It becomes hard to trust prosecutors to make decisions regarding officers fairly. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will support this important proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen.
The next speaker on our list is Thomas Giorno.
I don't see him on the list anymore.
Okay.
He may have dropped off.
The next speaker on our list is a phone number that ends in the 4 digits of 2248.
On mute as well.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Sherianne El-Rawi, last name E-L-R-A-W-I. I'm an attorney in good standing licensed in the state of California, and I'm calling from Orange County, California. I will keep this brief as the committee has heard many comments. I'm in support of every commentator before me that has supported this proposal. And I think as attorneys, we understand the need to protect the integrity of this profession and to ensure the independence of the district attorney's office. So I strongly support the measure. I hope the committee will take into consideration all the comments before me, and I yield my time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sharon. I'm sorry, Sharon, you spoke. Our next speaker is Ana Elisa Fuentes.
Hello. Are you able to hear me?
We are. Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, esteemed panelists of the California State Bar, attendees, and fellow citizens. My name is Ana Elisa Fuentes. I'm a paralegal studies student here in San Francisco, and these are my own words. I am here to support the ethics proposal before the California State Bar to cure the conflict, and I'm asking the California State Bar to do the same. My concern is this. From my point of view, I perceive that police unions are actually retaining prosecutors. Police union donations are actually retainer fees disguised. When an attorney, the prosecutor in this case is retained by police unions, then prosecutors are ethically bound to their client, the police unions, in duty, loyalty, and confidentiality. This is clearly unethical. This mutual reciprocal contract between police unions, and prosecutors is used to manipulate the criminal justice system. Conversely, how can common persons alleged of a crime afford to post bail against this powerful triad when, in fact, most Americans do not have an extra $400 in their accounts in the case of an emergency? To further, how can the common person expect fairness, equal justice, and treatment under a law when a prearranged agreement or contract between police unions, and prosecutors exists? This is blatant inequity. This undue and inequitable influence serves to protect and serve the police union, not the common person. If 95% of all elected prosecutors receive donations and support from law enforcement, while only 98.5% of police kill in the line of duty that are not being held accountable, then this is a mirrored reflection of mutual reciprocal and beneficial contracts between the unethical triad. In the interest of public safety, justice, and equity, this conflict of interests must be curtailed. I'm asking the California State Bar to support this reform to cure the conflict of interest. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next speaker on our list is Farmars Nabavi.
Yes, thank you. I'm an attorney licensed by the State Bar of California. I live in Los Angeles County, and I support banning prosecutors.
Could you spell your name for us, please?
Sure. That's FARAMARZNABAVI. And I support banning prosecutors from taking campaign money from unions, professional associations, and advocacy organizations representing law enforcement officers. I also agree with the comments made by San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin. The proposed rule is a necessary but not sufficient step to cure the conflict of interest that prosecutors have due to law enforcement influence. Prosecutors are in a unique role as law enforcement because they have the discretion to select cases and defendants, and law enforcement has a unique role because virtually all prosecution cases depend on law enforcement witnesses. Here in Los Angeles, law enforcement kills with impunity unarmed, nonviolent people. Law enforcement knows that the district attorney won't prosecute them. The millions of dollars that law enforcement associations have given to the district attorney demonstrate that they believe that the district attorney has served and will continue to serve their interests. The prosecutors are charged with representing the people of the state of California, not just the police of the state of California. This perception of prosecutorial indebtedness to law enforcement campaign contributions undermines public confidence in the judicial system. Not only do prosecutors have a conflict of interest in deciding whether to prosecute law enforcement, as San Bernardino Deputy Public Defender Jeremy Garrett pointed out, prosecutors may also have a conflict of interest in prosecuting someone arrested by law enforcement without probable cause. I'll address several of the community's questions. Question number 3, the lack of prosecution of law enforcement officers who killed unarmed nonviolent people is evidence that these rules didn't prevent this conflict of interest. Moreover, dead victims of law enforcement can't provide informed written consent to prosecutors under Rule 1.7 to allow this conflict of interest to exist. Question number 6, what is encompassed by seeking or accepting financial or political support? I would say we can look at this, and also on question 7, what kind of prior restraint of protected speech is involved here? That this rule does not prevent law enforcement associations or individual members of law enforcement from endorsing the candidate of their choice, for advocating for the candidate of choice. It simply prevents them from making a direct contribution to the campaigns. And finally, question 11, Penal Code Section 1424 clearly has failed to stop the killings of unarmed, nonviolent people by law enforcement. So it is not sufficient. This rule is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Karina Alvarez.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Karina Alvarez, and I'm a lawyer with the Santa Clara Public Defender's Office. I'm calling from San Francisco, and I'm going to keep it brief since many of the comments that have been made, I stand by those. I specifically endorse the comments made by District Attorney Chesa Boudin and Deputy Public Defender Jeremy Garrett, among others. I have many stories like Public Defender Garrett. I do believe that police unions should not influence the laws that govern their behavior in the first place. We need true police accountability now more than ever. Furthermore, the importance of not only avoiding an actual conflict, but also avoiding the appearance of a conflict is critical in this time where the public's trust is understandably and justifiably at an all-time low when it comes to law enforcement and the overall judicial system. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez.
Our next speaker is a phone number whose last four digits are 0344.
Hi, this is Caroline Cochran, C-O-C-H-R-A-N. I'm calling from San Francisco. I was going to read you the dictionary definition of bribe, which is to persuade someone to act in one's favor, typically illegally or dishonestly, by gift of money or other inducement. Also from vocabulary.com, you pay a bribe to someone to do something they wouldn't do otherwise. It's usually dishonest and often criminal. Bribes can be utterly corrupt and illegal, like when you offer a bribe to a politician, so she'll make a decision in your favor. And I really consider this conflict of interest between prosecutors accepting money from law enforcement unions as a bribe, a legal one in this case. And I asked the Ethics Committee to support Chesa Boudin's rule to ban this type of corrupt system in the future. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Alish. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
Hi, my name is Alex Kalish, and it's A-L-E-X-K-A-L-I-S-H. And I'll keep it brief. I'm just calling to voice my support for this ethics proposal. To me, the conflict of interest is blatantly obvious, and can look to the many comments for the specifics around that blatancy. But I'd like to endorse specifically the comments of Nick Moosney, and I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Raya Steyer.
Give me a second. I'm looking for the name on the list. Hold on.
R-A-Y-A.
Yeah, I don't see it here anymore. They may have disconnected.
The next speaker on our list is Ebony Gonzalez.
Oh, 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Ebony.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi. My name is Ebony Pegas Gonzalez, and I support the proposal. I'm calling in representation for my brother, Marvin Pegas Jr., who was wrongfully convicted. I basically wanted to just chime in. I love the things that people have said previously, but I wanted to speak on police coercion. And also, my brother's case has been with the CRU unit for 2 years. They investigated his case. Basically, 2 witnesses came back and recanted that the police coerced them. They also gave pretty details on what they did, cases that were dropped for their testimony. During the 2 years of the investigation with the CRU unit, which is Jackie Lacey's conviction review unit, they basically never went back. They never went back and interviewed the police. When we asked why they weren't interviewed, why they didn't investigate correctly to the police that were accused of being coerced, their response to my family was that they don't have a mechanism to take care of cops and their dirty acts. Deputy District Attorney Robert Grace also stated to me that basically whether the detective was dirty or not, it's a civil claim that we would have to make, which bothers me in regards to my brother's in prison and has been in prison for 15 years because this officer decided to make these people pick him out. When my case goes through the district attorney's office and proper channels are not taken and proper investigations are not done, just because it's an officer that's an accused, that bothers me. And it also sends up a red flag. Another thing is they never throughout the 2 years, they never went and even talked to him. They said that they wouldn't go talk to him, and that basically wasn't something that they were gonna do. They told us that they wanted to interview my brother. We had an attorney present. They were back and forth with our attorney. They basically told our attorney over a voicemail that they wouldn't need to interview him. 1 month later, the CRU unit had my brother's cell hit. They came and got him at 5 a.m. in the morning with a court order. LAPD officers brought my brother from Lancaster State Prison down to 77th Police Station, and they interviewed him for 3 days without his attorney present. My concern is that the district attorney's office—
15 seconds remaining.
Okay, my concern is that the district attorney's office refused to interview the police, but you wrongfully go get someone from prison to interview them instead of talking to their attorney and taking the correct channels. That is why I go with the proposal. I believe that they cover up and protect the police at all costs.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
The next speaker on our list is Zachary Linowitz.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. My name is Zachary Linowitz, and I'm a public defender in Contra Costa County. I really don't have much to add that hasn't already been said, but I think it's important that I voice my strong support of the proposed ethics rule. As a public defender, I frequently deal with the identification of conflicts of interest, and some are deeply concealed and others are glaringly obvious. And this one, the one at issue, is glaringly obvious. And I'm frankly surprised that it's not being addressed until now in 2020. I think just like the coronavirus, this pandemic has become a political issue, so too has the police funding of prosecutors' elections become a political issue, and that's really inappropriate, and it's really unfortunate and even shameful. So I strongly support this proposed rule, and I urge the committee to adopt it, wear a mask, defund the police, and cure the conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker on our list is Jadai.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Jadai Hamilton. You spell my first name Jadai. Last name is Hamilton. I also don't have much to add beyond what's been said. I would like to just specifically say that I endorse this ethics proposal strongly. I'm a public defender in San Bernardino County. I work with the juvenile division and I represent incarcerated youth. And I would like to also specifically endorse what my colleagues Brianna Ruiz and Jeremy Garrett said. I share many of the experiences that have been voiced by all the public defenders and also individuals shared on this platform. And I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker on our list is Alex Cirilla.
Hi, my name is Alex Cirilla. I think you already have my last name. Again, just not that, to belabor the point, but I'm just calling in support of the ethics proposal. I am a resident of LA County and, living in proximity to, to Los Angeles and, it being one of the most, having the most murderous police department. It's obviously important, to sort of end that conflict where obviously sort of the proximity of the district attorney's office and the police department, and that requires that this the sort of reformist measure be taken to to at least ensure proper proper oversight of police departments and their oftentimes violent behavior. So yes, just calling in support of that. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker on our list is Angelina.
Hi, my name is calling in to support the ethics proposal to stop prosecutors from accepting law enforcement union money and support. And I yield my time.
Before you go, you just cut out. Could you just please confirm your name? Did I have it correct?
Yes, it's pronounced Angelina, and then last name is Zeiser, Z-E-I-S-E-R.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the last speaker on our list is Sudi Tronson.
Sudi,
Yes.
you're on mute.
Unmute.
Try one more time. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, I'm Sudi Tronson and I live in San Mateo County. As an active member of the California Bar, I fully endorse the ethics proposal to prevent prosecutors from taking money from the police unions. I also hope California can implement a law that would extend the same to city attorneys, mayors, council members, and city managers, since they set city and police budgets, oversight committees, and reporting requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Steve, there were, one additional name has been added, Praveen Sinha.
Hi, my name is Praveen Sinha. Thank you so much. I live in San Francisco. I've worked for multiple nonprofits that have supported families who have been affected by police and state violence, most recently including Families United, Open Circle. And I've worked with a bunch of families, mothers, fathers whose children have been killed by police many times in egregious circumstances. And we're left with pretty much no legal tools to actually get any sort of justice. And so because of that, I'm definitely endorsing this ethics reform and proposal. Thank you so much for your time, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much. So Andrew, does that bring us to the end of our list?
It does. If you'll recall, there were about 2 or 3 people who I called previously, and they were not present at that time. If you'll permit me, I think it would be prudent just to give them, for me to call their names one last time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first was, go ahead.
But the only way that they would be able to respond is in the chat box, or to send me an email in the next minute or 2.
Okay, I'll just ask, I'll call their name, and if they're here, if you could just respond in the chat window that you're here and you're interested in speaking, we will provide a way to do that. And the first was Isabel Lopez. The next person was Deidre Edgar. Another person was just two initials, M as in Mary, N as in Nancy. We also missed Johan Anderson, Thomas Giorno, and Raya Steyer. If any of you are present, just indicate that you're here in the chat, and we will activate you.
Also, you missed one person, Adrian Galvin from the Racial Justice Committee.
Thank you.
I have not received an email or seen anything in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, if we have no other speakers, and we've we sent out a message to the chat 5 or 6 minutes ago, and now we've done a further canvass of the people who we missed, and I think we're at a place then where we don't have any indication that there's anyone else interested in making any comments. And with that in mind, I think we can adjourn. Is that staff? Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to say thank you to everyone who spoke today and all who came and listened. I know we had many people listening who were not, who did not speak. And it's now, by my calculation, it's about 12:46 p.m. and we're going to adjourn this public hearing. And have a good afternoon, and we'll go off the record now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.